Welcome, everybody. This is the third live with JonahLisa this month. This is my big experiment for seeing how getting out there and putting out short videos and having conversations every week can work to help bring value of knowledge that I've gained over several decades. And also, start to build my business. So I'm just really happy that you all are here. This past week, the theme of the Assumptions Quest videos has been on a specific set of assumptions that Ellie Goldratt and his daughter Efrat talked about in their book, The Choice, that some people call them, what we'll end up with is usually called the pillars of TOC. I think of them more as the pillars for clear thinking, which is what Goldratt was really trying to give us. Kathy and I have both been in this TOC world for a long time. There's lots of arguments about what you include in TOC and what you don't, and what was just coming from Ellie Goldratt, but not part of that body of knowledge. So this, to me, whether you consider it part of theory of constraints or not, for me, are true pillars for helping us to navigate through the obstacles that are thrown our way, to help us reach goals, to help us live a much more fulfilling life. So I'm going to share my screen for a little while, just because I have a very short presentation prepared for you. And then we'll go back to, more conversation kind of mode. And I will get all the rest of this stuff off the screen so that you only need to see what you care about. Everything else is my ability to look at you. Okay. So in the videos this week, and Phil, maybe you'll be encouraged to go watch them. They're all very short. The videos that I post during the course of the week are very short, just a couple of minutes in duration. My aim originally was for 1 to 2 minutes. I think a couple I was able to get to 2 minutes, but mostly they're in the 3 to 4 minute kind of category, which for me is still a pretty big feat. So, but the subject matter this week was what are the obstacles that we don't even really think about as obstacles, but the obstacles that are in our way to putting our minds and our hearts in a more effective way to achieving the meaningful thing, the things that are meaningful for us, the goals that we set for ourselves and our businesses. And at the end of the day, right, I like to think about it as, at the end of the day, when I'm lying on the deathbed, awake for the final moments of my life, and I look back and I think, okay, that was a fulfilling life. And these 4 obstacles get in our way of our ability to really be able to say that. So these are the obstacles that we talked about. They have to do with our viewpoints, the way that we view complexity. Well, I'll talk about them in the order that I covered them this week. The way that we view people. So think about when things go wrong and our tendency is to blame, right? First, we go to accountability and blame. And how much does accountability and blame solve? It doesn't solve anything. It might make you feel a little bit better, but it doesn't solve anything. And so rather than going first to blame, take a pause and try to train ourselves to think first, well, people are really good. And I've shared a saying that I learned many years ago that said, okay, when you're going to blame, take a pause and just ask yourself, why would a reasonable, rational, decent human being behave that way? And there can be any number of plausible answers, which may or may not be true, but at least it starts to shift you from there and move you more toward solving the situation rather than dwelling in the blame of it. The next one that I talked about this week was our perception of conflicts. And our view of conflicts is that they're just a given, and some conflicts can just never be solved. And the way to deal with conflicts is compromise. And compromise typically means everybody's giving something up. right? Compromise typically means nobody's really happy in the end. The winners are win less, the losers lose less, and nobody's really happy. And if instead of going first to saying this conflict can never be solved, I put my hand up, which frankly then leads us to blame, right? We think it can't be solved, so now we got to blame somebody to feel better about it. Just think instead, every conflict can actually be removed. And when I couple that with people are good, then maybe I can even find win-win solutions. And so it shifts our mindset, gives us the energy to go solve things, and maybe even find ways to collaborate with the other side of the table, if you will, and seek the solution. I want to also say here that conflicts aren't always between people. Conflicts are any kind of conflicting situation that we humans set up. We're in conflict over measurements. We're in conflict over, for instance, how much inventory to hold in a business. That's not necessarily a conflict between people, but the moment you think, well, I need to do more inventory or I need to do less inventory, that's a conflict that needs to be solved. The third obstacle that I talked about was our view toward complexity and our tendency to think that a situation, right, the bigger the problem, the bigger the mess, the bigger the organization, the bigger the system, the more complex it is. And sometimes we think it's just too big to solve. It's too complex to solve. We'll never think our way through this. And think about, I think one of the reasons that so many of our countries are in such a mess is we keep thinking that it's too complex to solve, and we start chipping away at little pieces and we make it even more complex, right? The other part of this is we think that the more complex the situation, the system, the more complicated, the bigger the problem, the bigger the issue, the more complex or the more complicated the solution needs to be. And then we start creating bureaucracies and confusion and entanglement. And again, we're solving less than we could and we back away. The other thing that our view of complexity does to us is it serves to lead us to back away from having big goals. If we think that something is going to be too big to solve, or too much for me to handle, too much for us to handle, I think about how many people in the country I live in the US, have just thrown their arms up and said, it's just too much, it's just too big, what can we do? And you start to feel helpless. And so you set your sights much lower, and we don't solve the real issues. And so instead of letting the complexity of a situation overwhelm us to the degree that we say, I'm going to lower the goal and I'm not going to try to solve that, what I was taught was any complex system has inherent simplicity underneath it. Even if you go, even our brains, the human body, right? Every system that you can think about, if you want to improve it, you can identify the constraint, for example, the one thing that if you touch that, if you work on that, will make the biggest difference in the world. And this is where TOC just comes to bring so much value, because it teaches us in a couple different ways. Find the constraint to flow. There's one thing to work on in order to get more through the system. Find the one core cause for many, many problems. So it helps us become, I think of as the physician for our organizations, where we start looking first at the symptoms and then trying to understand what's the disease that's responsible for all the symptoms, rather than going a symptom at a time. And then finally, the fourth obstacle that I talked about is the way that we view knowledge, or more precisely, I think it's the way we view what we know. And all too often we think to ourselves, and again, this is all in relation to the kinds of things that are meaningful to us, that we want to keep making better in our lives. And sometimes we lead ourselves down the path where we are convinced that there's no more improvement to be gained, or there's only tiny incremental improvement left to be gained. When we think that, guess what? We won't gain more improvement. but if we, and when the situation is bothersome for us, when we'd really like to improve it, that's when it starts becoming problematic, is that we again set our sights lower than we otherwise could. I'd love to, but I can't. Not because it's too complex, but because I just don't think it can be improved. And here, what I was taught was, instead of saying, I know with an exclamation point that this can't be improved or that I can't do this or that, step back and just try this assumption for size and just try to convince yourself every situation can really be significantly improved. I just need to find the assumption that I'm making or that we collectively are making that's holding it back from being able to go from where we are now to the next big leap. So these are the 4 assumptions that I went through this week, the 4 obstacles. And now I want to spend a few minutes to just build the rest of the picture. Kathy, all these limit hope, options, and there's even an opportunity to make a difference. Might as well give up. Yeah, there's so much more we could do if we just open ourselves up to the possibilities that we don't know at all. That if you remember, the very first of the videos that I started out with is, well, maybe I'm not right. And the moment we give ourselves that healthy doubt of maybe there's more to be learned, maybe this situation really can be improved, then even if I fail at actually improving it, the journey to try will have been worth it, will have been meaningful. So now let me put the rest of the picture together for you. And okay, so this little person is my little icon for having a fulfilling life, right? She's just so pleased with how it's all been going. And so that's what we really want, all of us at the end of the day, is to look back and say we've had a fulfilled life. And what we need in order for us to be able to say that is what Ellie Goldratt called enough meaningful successes over the course of our life. What's meaningful? Meaningful for you might be different than meaningful for me, but make sure that you work on getting clarity on what's meaningful for you. Try and get clearer on what your own purpose is, what your own passion is, what you are here to pursue the ongoing improvement of. And when you're able to do that and you have more and more meaningful successes in there, it feels good. Now, what do we need in order to get more and more meaningful successes? Goldratt talked about 3 conditions that we need to keep working on setting up for ourselves. So in order for us to have more and more meaningful successes in our life, we need 1. So on the left here, you can see it's like, oh my God, it's pouring and it's raining, but she's still plowing ahead with her umbrella facing the wind. We need to have the stamina to overcome our failures. We can't let a failure get us so down that we lose our will to keep finding the solution and finding the next thing to do to pursue our purpose and our goals. I will say that Ellie Goldratt was, for me, the model of people who, when he would fail, and he might have failed more than anybody I've known, whenever he failed, he looked at the failure. If he was upset about it, he'd be upset about it for a flash. And then he would work on, what can I learn from this? There's an opportunity here for me to understand and dive into. And if I understand why it didn't turn out the way it did, I can use that in the next thing I'm going to do to really continue to pursue my goal. And that's what that's talking about. Now think about it. If I'm going to, and I have these on the left so that as I'm going through this, you could think about now, how would these new assumptions help me in my ability to be able to have the stamina to overcome the failures? And I think that you'll be able to put those connections together. The next the next condition that we should continuously try to nurture in our lives is to have many opportunities. It doesn't mean that I know the list of every opportunity that I have. It means that we're always open for opportunities. We're always preparing ourselves for opportunities. So for example, when I look at a failure that I've had as a potential opportunity for the next time around, I'll never be at a loss for opportunities to keep going and pursuing my dreams. The third piece, right? And now think about, right, how each of these new assumptions can help us see opportunities where maybe before we saw none. People are good. I can always find win-win solutions. I'm not blaming. I keep telling myself, never say I know. So it allows these doors to open up for us in ways that we may not have seen before. And the third one is our ability to collaborate with others. Meaningful successes for most of us mean, when it's a really meaningful success, it means you've accomplished something that you've probably worked hard at, that you've overcome something. And so usually when we're having super meaningful successes, they typically involve other people. Either I've done something for others, or when we think about our organizations, we've done something with others. You don't have the same skills as I do. I don't have the same skills as you do. Georgie, you're building a board because you know that you need to get people around you who can see things more and differently than you do. That's collaboration so that we can reach big goals. Now think about how, if we use these assumptions, we will be in a position where we might start attracting people to us that we may not have before. Clearly because of the mindset that we're moving forward with. So I wanted to, so this is what it's about, right? And these three, in order to create these three conditions, Goldratt said, we've got to be able to think clearly. And in order to think clearly, we need to overcome these obstacles. And from my personal experience, the way I think about it is I'm never going to be rid of those obstacles. They might just be part of the human condition. But if I could keep reminding myself, if I give myself that chance to pause, use these as mantras, I can continuously work to overcome them and be able to achieve more and more. So that's the bit. I wanted to put it all together in one picture, and I will share this with you guys if you want. I'm happy to share the deck. I'll just mail it out to everybody who joined today, to everybody who signed up. Now I get to look at you all again, and we get to have a conversation. Any questions, comments, insights on any of that, or anything from this past week?
I really like that slide that puts everything all together. I'd like to have that and just put it on my wall in front of me to remind myself of where I'm going and what I need to do to get there.
Gladly.
I could definitely relate to everything, as you said, from top to bottom, from the 4 obstacles to the thinking clearly for the 3, the endurance, the opportunities, and the collaboration.
Cool. Which of the obstacles are hardest for you? And this is not just to you, Georgie, this is to the group.
But for me, it's the complexity, the complex of it is what I'm trying to create a good vision. So this way I could think clear on how to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest ones is remembering that people are good and have good intentions for the most part, and most people's intentions aren't to screw something up for you or to do something incorrectly, and just remembering that we're all people and everyone has their own point of view. I think it's also reminding people to listen to one another and to try and see something from someone else's point of view.
Yep. Even if they're wrong.
They're right to themselves, but maybe not to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can really see how, especially for me, the most important one is conflict, that there are no conflicts in reality, and understanding that drives me then to not give up, to keep pushing. If we're seeing compromise, then that's a sign for sure that there's a conflict somewhere in the system that I've got to find and surface and get rid of. But without that belief that there are no conflicts in reality, you don't have the energy to keep working on it.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we have conflicts. They just don't have to be there.
Right. Yeah. It's not like, things are solvable, but you have to have the energy. If you don't have the belief, you won't have the energy to do it.
Right. Exactly.
My perspective, I think, is a little bit different because I've been exposed to and used and taught these tools for so long that they're here. But just because you have and know the tools doesn't always mean you remember to use them.
Right.
So that part that really resonated with me is stop in that instant and ask yourself. And to me, that's the hardest part to do. Because I think I must know because I've done this for so long, but I don't.
Yeah. Jen.
Lisa, this is my first time with you, and I don't, who is Eli? Is it Goldrich? Goldrick? What is his
Goldrat? Eliyahu Goldrat was an Israeli, Goldrat.
Okay.
Was an Israeli physicist who turned business guru. And he was my mentor for 25 years. He wrote several books. One of them continues to be on the business bestseller list. And so much of my career has been spent in using and teaching, helping him develop a lot of what is the body of knowledge that he first came up with, which is called theory of constraints.
It's called what? Theory of constraints?
Theory of constraints. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Which goes back to, so now I'll tie it to one of the subjects, which goes back to our perception of complexity. One of the big things that he's done is we don't need to solve every problem. In any system, there's one problem that's causing most. In any process flow, there's one thing that really constrains it if you want to get more through it. And so finding that is really the key to making big improvements. And that's, now you heard the gist of it in one sentence. That little bell that you guys heard was our 22 minutes. So I'm going to turn off the recording, and anybody who wants to hang out and chat for a little bit more, you are welcome to. So before I turn off the recording, I just want to say thank you for joining me. I hope it was valuable. I'm going to try to have a lot of fun next week with the Assumptions Quest on my birthday week. So yeah, I'm going to turn off the recording now, and then we can chat.